action happened in that time. I made sure of it. And it looks like just a huge fleet of vultures for MVP. And that seems to be the norm these days for TVT, is just there's so many vultures out on the field. Mines don't really do that great TVT, just because you can really attack move a ball of mech through pretty much any number, almost any number of mines, as well as you have it grouped up tight enough where they'll just attack, move, and stop, and they attack fast enough to kill the mines before they can do much damage. And yeah, there is one Wraith out in the field looking to do, I think, just possibly some scouting. I don't think he's going to be looking to do too much harassment unless he feels like he could harass maybe floating buildings or dropships that are incoming. And it looks like just a huge force of tanks and vultures. Fantasy really ahead in the troop count here, especially with the tanks. Even he has Goliath tech in the field to take out that Wraith. It looks like MVP here is just going to try to hold this middle ground ramp here. If he is forced down that ramp by Fantasy, I think, by the way, I think Fantasy can do at this point. He can just rush in those vultures and to take some of the fire and then siege up. And unless MVP focus fires down those tanks, then I think it will be successful. And now, yeah, we see MVP taking that bottom right base with the gas, and Fantasy is just going to take that mineral only. A little bit easier to hold, but there, like I said, there is no gas at that expansion, so I guess if the mining on that gas goes on for a long enough time, MVP will have the advantage. But I think before that advantage even kicks in, Fantasy would have expanded to the top left, which it appears he might be doing right now, actually. So yeah, no real advantage for MVP at this point. So yeah, MVP kind of just allowed Fantasy to fight back in this game, although in a TVP I will say that it is difficult to hold an advantage. And here we go with a little bit of an engagement, tanks going down left and right, vultures being used quite effectively for Fantasy. Like I said, he could just run those vultures in and pick off some of those tanks, push that tank line forward and pick off some of those tanks. Really nice game sense there as well, sending in a single vulture to get off that last hit on that tank, just to save himself the trouble of taking one last siege tank shell from that one remaining tank. And I think MVP really knows that he's in a little bit of trouble here. He's going to try to hold that bottom right base. However, vultures are now streaming in. This map does allow for a lot of ways to cross paths and just run harassing units around, and vultures are the unit to do it. And vultures now picking away at the SCV line at that bottom right base, just completely annihilating everything. And now he's going to add insult to injury here, or to put salt in the wound rather, he's going to take the top of this ramp and kill as many vultures as he can, rather than fleeing with that vulture pack having done its damage already. And now he's going to set some mines as well into the base. So this pack of vultures really doing a lot more damage than they should excuse me than they should have, as well as pushing across the middle of the map. And here's where Fantasy really shines in his TVT. In his multitasking, he's doing harassment at the bottom right. He's got mines down there. It's not going to do too much unless MVP looks to set up some siege tank defense. But now he's as well taking his main force and pushed across the middle of the field. He's shelling from that low ground, which doesn't sound that advantageous because of the mischance. However, he can shell into that SCV line, and I do want to say at this point in time, Moletrap did this amazing video on the statistics of and the mechanics of mischances from high ground to low ground, and I actually watched the whole thing. I thought it was pretty entertaining as well as informational. So it's a good watch. Go to Moletrap's channel if you haven't already, which, if you're watching, like I always say, if you're watching my stuff, you should know about him and the other commentators as well by this point. So a little bit of a tank push coming across the field here. It looks like Fantasy has been cleaned up in that low ground position. However, he did, I think, the economic damage that he would have liked to do. And now he's just going to hold this left side of the map. Fantasy did not actually need to do any economic harassment because he is on 4 base and MVP is only on 3 base. And even if MVP looks to put up that 4th base to counter it, not only will he be economically behind because of mining time already done, but he's going to have a hard time holding it. And I don't think he's going to be able to set it up, though, with this push coming across the field here. A ton of vultures and just completely outnumbered, overwhelmed, and just one dropship out in the field. One was pushing across the field as well for Fantasy, I think just reinforcing this push here. But one dropship for MVP, and Fantasy's going to push in here. And to his delight, I think he's not going to find a command center. He might have been looking to take that command center down, and yeah, just completely cutting off the reinforcement route as well, and picking off some SCVs with this pack of vultures. And oh, mine goes off there, hitting some tanks. But like I was gonna say, he was probably looking to find an expansion and take it down. But knowing that the expansion has not gone up yet is probably going to be an even better find for him, knowing that the mining time hasn't even been clocked in yet. So, yeah, Vulture's down at the bottom right. It's now 2 base on 4 base, and it's Fantasy versus MVP. I mean, I don't want to rag on MVP too hard. I have seen some good games of his, but as we can see here, just his multitasking, his game sense, and his gameplay just not up to the par of an S-class player like Fantasy. And I don't like using that S-class term very often, but I mean, Fantasy's just one of those guys. I mean, you got to use some term to put him ahead of the rest. And GG coming from MVP, just a phenomenal game, allowing his opponent even to take that economic advantage in the beginning. And I think MVP's really got to rethink after this kind of a game. You really got to think of what it feels like to be the player, be a teammate, and especially what the coaches got to think of a game like this where one of your players gets economically ahead and just has the build order advantage, the rock, paper, scissors. He covers the rock with the paper, and you just got to think, if he can't come out ahead on a game like that where he just has that kind of an advantage, what can you do? I mean, do you attribute it to the other players, the opponent's great play or his S-class status, or do you say, it's time to go back to the drawing board and really sit down and clock in some practice hours? But anyways, enough of my tangent here. I'm going to move on to set 2, and yeah, I'll see you guys in set 2.